The A340 family is equipped with a Ground Proximity Warning System, GPWS. Its purpose is to enhance safety by alerting the crew to potentially hazardous situations involving terrain collision or incorrect landing configuration. The GPWS monitors the aircraft flight path and generates visual and audio warnings alerts when the aircraft is in one of the defined hazardous situations. These warnings will be overridden by stall or wind shear warnings. The GPWS processes the data from RA1, ADIRS 1, ILS 1, FMGEC 1, LGCIU 1. Failures of these units will be studied in the abnormal operation modules. Most GPWS alerts and warnings are generated as a result of changes in radar altimeter heights or the rates of those changes. The system predicts potential hazards from these trends, but has no forward-looking capability. Therefore, impact with a near vertical cliff face cannot be predicted. GPWS does not absolve the crew from monitoring aircraft position and safety altitude. The GPWS control panel is located on the left side of the overhead panel. GPWS visual warnings are provided on the miscellaneous panels. The system can be tested by pressing either GPWS glide slope push button switch. This test is normally performed by the maintenance crew. In addition, two loudspeakers located on each lower side of the main panel broadcast GPWS oral warnings even if they are turned off. GPWS enhances safety by alerting or warning the crew of potentially hazardous situations during flight at low heights. Crews should react to any GPWS warning immediately without attempting to assess its validity. GPWS operation is fully automatic in the normal lights out configuration. We will now study the oral and visual alerts and warnings. If a high rate of descent is detected at low level, the GPWS will generate an oral, repeated
sink rate
alert. If this rate is or becomes excessive, the repetitive oral warning
all up
will be generated. In both cases, the red GPWS lights will illuminate. If rising ground is detected as a potential threat to the safety of the aircraft, the GPWS will alert the crew with a repeated
terrain
oral alert. The system will generate a
all up
warning after the terrain alert has been repeated twice. The red GPWS lights will illuminate in either case. If the GPWS detects a rate of descent during the initial climb after takeoff or following a go-around, it will give a repeated
don't sink
alert with accompanying GPWS red lights. If the landing gear and flaps are retracted and the GPWS detects that the aircraft is close to the ground, it generates a
too low terrain
oral warning, and the GPWS red lights illuminate. At very low levels, the oral warning
too low gear
will be generated if the landing gear is still retracted. If the landing gear is down, but the flaps are not in landing configuration, the warning is
too low flap
note that the
too low gear
warning has priority over the
too low flap glide slope
below approximately 1,000 feet on an approach. A GPWS glide slope oral and visual alert will be generated if the runway is ILS equipped, the ILS is tuned, the ILS signal is valid, the aircraft is significantly below the glide slope. Both amber glide slope lights will illuminate.
Flight slope.
The oral message will become louder to indicate a warning if no corrective action is taken as the aircraft gets closer to the ground, or if it descends further below the glide slope. Note that some airports around the world have approaches and departures which are not compatible with standard GPWS operation. These airports are programmed into the GPWS database, and the warning thresholds are modified to avoid nuisance warnings. The GPWS panel allows the crew to inhibit some warnings. Flap 3 is a recognized landing configuration. If the option is used or if required by an ECAM procedure, the crew should select Landing Configuration 3 on the MCDU to ensure that the GPWS does not generate warnings when it detects that the aircraft is not in the full flap configuration. Following certain failures, a landing may have to be made with a reduced flap setting. The crew can select the Flap Mode push-button switch off to inhibit GPWS flap warnings. If the flap mode is off, the green Flap Mode Off message is displayed on the engine and warning display. When selected off, the Glide Slope Mode push-button switch will inhibit the GPWS glide slope warning. The white off light illuminates when the GPWS is selected off. All warnings are inhibited. If your aircraft is equipped with the enhanced GPWS, eGPWS, a forward-looking capability for terrain is added. The basic functions we have just studied remain unchanged. eGPWS is based on terrain databases and FMGEC current position, not on radar returns. The purpose of the eGPWS is to avoid a controlled flight into terrain and to give enough time to the crew to perform an avoidance maneuver. The terrain information is displayed on the ND except in plan mode. A different image texture, an image display which sweeps from center outward to both ND sides, and a terrain indication instead of the radar tilt indication help the crew to distinguish between the eGPWS terrain computed data and the ground picture sensed by the radar. The terrain elevation surrounding the aircraft is color-coded. Two Terrain On ND push-button switches are fitted on each side of the main panel. To display the terrain picture on his ND, a pilot will have to switch on his respective Terrain On ND push-button switch. Note that the weather radar information is replaced even if it is switched on. In the lights out position, the eGPWS operation is fully automatic. The terrain push-button switch in the off position allows the crew to inhibit the enhanced functions, but keeps the basic GPWS functions operative. In case of failure of the enhanced functions, the fault light comes on, but the basic GPWS functions remain operative. As for the basic GPWS, the system push-button switch controls the basic functions. The eGPWS uses a terrain database coupled with an FMGES position to calculate two terrain envelopes ahead of the aircraft. When a conflict is detected between these terrain envelopes and the terrain memorized in the database, an alert is triggered. One terrain envelope corresponds to a caution level, while the second one to a warning level. If the caution terrain envelope is penetrated, the areas which violate the caution envelope limits turn to a solid yellow color. An amber terrain ahead message appears and a repeated
Terrain ahead
oral alert is generated. If the terrain warning envelope is penetrated, the areas which violate the warning envelope turn to a solid red color. A red terrain ahead message appears and a repeated
Terrain ahead Pull up
oral alert is generated. In both cases, the red GPWS lights will illuminate. As for the basic GPWS warnings, crews should react immediately without attempting to assess its validity. In case of caution or warning, if terrain on ND is not selected on, the terrain display is set automatically to on and the on light on the terrain on ND push-button switch comes on. The second eGPWS protective function provides a terrain clearance floor envelope for each runway stored in the database. This function warns of a premature descent below this floor regardless of aircraft configuration. Caution: the relative height is calculated using the Captain Barrow setting. Thus, the system does not protect against Barrow setting errors. The position is calculated using FM1. The system does not protect against FM1 position errors. When the aircraft position accuracy provided by the FMGES is not sufficient, the enhance functions of the eGPWS are automatically deselected. Terrain standby appears in green on the ECAM memo and the terrain display is deselected until a high level of navigation accuracy is restored. The basic GPWS functions remain operative.